The largest extermination complex created by the Nazis during the Second World War was Auschwitz. Inside of the horrific camp, at least 1.1 million prisoners would be murdered, executed and killed inside of the barbed wire fences. Many of the stories of the camp are still being unearthed each day, and the camp was the main killing centre of the Holocaust. Within the walls, the guards who worked there were known for brutally administering violent beatings and sadistic attacks upon prisoners, often which resulted in death. The camp was split into 3 sections, and a huge number of subcamps served it. Auschwitz I was the main slave labour element, established first. Auschwitz II-Birkenau was the extermination complex, and Auschwitz III Monowitz was the IG Farben slave labour factory. Life inside of the camp was incredibly hard, with a gruelling daily routine in which prisoners would be underfed and would be kept in horrific conditions. The barracks were overcrowded, and there was a distinct lack of sanitation. This led to huge outbreaks of disease, and also malnutrition was common. But the violence and sadism exhibited by the guards led to the prisoners fearing anyone in uniform, and being scared to put a foot out of line. The rules at the camp were intensely barbaric, but one way in which the guards tried to get the prisoners to fall into line was by executing many prisoners in public view. The aim of this was that prisoners would see someone being hanged, for example, and then they would not rebel or resist. There were a number of different execution methods at Auschwitz, but inside the camp, dozens of thousands were executed. So join us today to look at the brutal executions of the prisoners of Auschwitz, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Prisoners inside of Auschwitz could be killed by guards and capos for only the smallest of infractions in the camp's rules. One example of this is returning for a second helping of food during meals, or stealing food from a pigsty to eat the pig's food. The situation at the camp was so desperate that some prisoners even removed their own gold teeth to barter to buy bread from staff. Punishment was brutal, and during roll call many prisoners would be flogged who had been found breaking the rules. This was often so severe that prisoners could pass away from the pain that was inflicted. Guards were routinely involved in murdering prisoners who weren't working hard enough too, and there were accounts of some staff members encouraging their dogs to be set upon the prisoners. There was murder and death around every corner of the camp, and the Nazis sought to instill a reign of terror over the prisoners. Auschwitz was a place of execution. Prisoners who were sent there as hostages, or who had a file which had been marked with the words "Return not desired" or "Do not transfer," meant that they were to be sent to the camp to be killed. It was the camp's commandant or the heads of different departments who could order executions, and over the years in which it was operational, thousands would be sentenced to death inside of the camp. Polish prisoners who had been sentenced to death by courts nearby for offences were also executed inside of Auschwitz, and it was Block 11 that gained a horrific reputation for crime and punishment. Block 11 was the name of a brick building found inside of Auschwitz I, and it was within here that the horrific torture and execution occurred. Inside of Block 11 were a number of specially made torture chambers, such as the standing cells, where a prisoner could be forced to stand for a period of days without being allowed to sit down. The oxygen in these cells was very limited, and some prisoners were forced to stand up all night for 20 nights, being let out to work during the day. It was within Block 11 that the first attempts to kill people using Zyklon B occurred, and also torture during interrogation was administered using different devices. One such device was a boga swing, which was used to suspend a prisoner in a horrific position, and during this prisoners were often beaten badly there. But between the courtyard of Block 10 and Block 11 stands the death wall. This was the execution area in which many prisoners would go to their deaths being shot by a firing squad while stood up against the wall. Today the death wall can still be seen, and it serves today as a memorial to those who were executed up against it. Thousands were executed at the death wall, including an estimated 4,500 political prisoners. The condemned prisoners would be brought from their cells in Block 11 in the main camp, and then were forced to strip naked on the ground. Women who were to be shot against the death wall derobed in a different room, and then the condemned prisoners were led to the death wall in pairs. Their hands had been secured behind their backs. The SS executioner who was there to execute on specific days then walked up behind them and shot them in the back of the head with his small caliber rifle. Mass shootings did also occur here where firing squads would be used. Prisoners would then be forced to collect the corpses and place them on trucks to be delivered to the crematoria. There were a number of mass killings that took place at the death wall. On October 7, 1944, the SS shot 200 Jews in reprisals for the Sonderkommando rebellion. But many of the prisoners were executed by shooting, with Soviet prisoners of war killed in this manner being forced to stand in various gravel pits around the camp. Many of the prisoners killed in this way never made it onto the camp's official records. Rudolf Höss, the commandant, would state that execution orders arrived in an unbroken stream, showing that many executions were ordered by the Nazis. One SS officer who witnessed many of the executions at the death wall said, "Some of these walking skeletons had spent months in the stinking cells where not even animals would be kept, and they could barely manage to stand straight. And yet at the last moment many of them shouted, 'Long live Poland,' or 'Long live freedom.'" Hangings were also common at Auschwitz, and these were performed in public to ensure that prisoners were aware of crimes of fellow prisoners. Because of this, they occurred inside of public spaces, usually during roll call. Each day prisoners were forced to stand for hours on end whilst roll call took place, and the Nazis used this as a time to conduct public executions and hangings. There were a number of gallows found around the camp, and on these structures a number of prisoners would be killed for infringements of the camp's laws. During one horrific episode, 12 prisoners from the Surveyors' Labour Detail were hanged en masse on the 19th of July 1943, as 3 prisoners had escaped from their group. Their bodies were left there for a while, to act as a reminder to the prisoners not to run or escape Auschwitz. The final hangings took place shortly before the camp was liberated, and it was usually for escape attempts that someone found themselves at the gallows. One example is Mala Zimetbaum, who along with her boyfriend Galinski had managed to escape Auschwitz before they were captured. Galinski was hanged on the gallows, but Zimetbaum appealed to the crowd and defied until the very end. It's said that Galinski had jumped into the noose before his verdict was read, shouting "Long live Poland," but Zimetbaum, it's believed, whilst facing the gallows tried to take her own life, slicing her veins in her elbows with a concealed razor blade. It's claimed that she slapped a guard whilst bleeding, and that Maria Mandel, a horrific guard, because of her defiance, even ordered Zimetbaum to be burned alive inside the camp. The whole point of hangings at Auschwitz was to put other prisoners off committing crimes and offending. It was inside of the gas chambers that the majority of those who died at Auschwitz were killed inside of. During selection processes, those deemed fit enough to work were allowed in the camp and were registered, but those who were not were then sent straight to their deaths. Thousands of people who had simply just arrived at Auschwitz were sent straight to their end. During selection on arrival, the groups selected to die instantly included mostly all children, women, small children, the elderly, and those deemed not fit enough to work. Any fault, scar or blemish could lead to someone being sent to their deaths. Children who were below a certain height were also sent to the gas chambers. Throughout their time inside of the camp, prisoners were also regularly selected who were not fit enough to work being sent to the chambers. The belongings of these victims were then seized and were sorted before the prisoners were then driven towards the gas chambers. Victims were then forced to undress, and when they arrived there, it was said they were going to have a shower and delouse, but when they entered the chamber, Zyklon B, the poisonous pesticide, was pumped into the chamber, and within minutes hundreds were killed. It was said by one member of the Sonderkommando that it would be difficult to imagine that so many people would fit into a small room. Anyone who did not want to go inside was shot or torn apart by dogs. They would have suffocated from the lack of air. Then all the doors were sealed tight and the gas thrown in by way of a small hole in the ceiling. There was nothing more that people could do. Within around 10 minutes, hundreds were killed inside of the chambers. It was in this way that hundreds of thousands of innocent people were killed inside of Auschwitz. Inside of Auschwitz, at least 1.1 million people were killed. The Germans tried to hide the extent of their crimes there, and mass graves were filled with corpses of thousands and the ashes of those who had been burned inside the crematoria. It was the deadliest site used during the Holocaust to massacre and exterminate those whom the Nazis deemed undesirable. Today Auschwitz remains open as a memorial to all of those who were killed inside of the walls by one of history's most evil regimes. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.